Welcome to this owner's class video for the 14CG754 Overlock machine. In this introductory video, we'll begin with an overview of the various parts of your machine. We'll show you how to correctly thread your machine for the most commonly used stitches and give you examples of what those stitches could be used for. We'll finish up with a few tips for successful overlock sewing. So let's get started with a quick tour of your machine. Before we sew, we've got to plug the machine in. So let's do that right over here. And this is our switch to turn the machine on. So you'll also notice the light comes on. Right here, this is our hand wheel. You want to always turn that toward you. This is your stitch length dial. You'll notice it's set at 3. There's a little mark right here on the side of the machine. It's set at 3, which is a kind of average stitch length. You can adjust it depending on your project. We'll talk more about that later. And this is your differential feed lever. And we'll talk about differential feed later on in the video. When I come up here to the top of the machine, you'll notice I have a carry handle. There are 4 thread guides up here at the top, sort of near the back of the machine, one that corresponds to each one of the 4 threads. And these are my tension dials for each one of the 4 threads. This is your looper cover, which gives us access to the loopers so we could thread the machine. To open it, we want to place our thumb right here in this indentation, push to the right as we pull forward. We can see a few things in here. I can see my loopers, the upper looper and lower looper. I can see threading charts and a diagram of the threading path. We'll talk about threading in just a little bit. This is your stationary blade and your movable knife. They work like a little pair of scissors to trim the edge of the fabric as you sew before the stitch forms on the edge. They cut first, then the stitch forms on the edge. You can sew without the blade by pushing in the movable knife and rolling it back out of the way until you hear it click into place. But most of your sewing, you'll be using the blades engaged. So just bring that back around until you feel that go right back into position. This is our stitch finger adjustment lever, and right now when you first take the machine out of the box, it'll be in the back position for regular sewing. We would move it forward to make the stitch finger narrower when we do things like a rolled hem. For now, I'm going to push it away from me for regular sewing, and we'll talk more about that later when we thread up different stitches. This is your stitch width adjustment knob. And what that does is it controls the position of your lower blade, if it's more to the left or more to the right. And that you would adjust depending on the thickness of the fabric that you're sewing. This is your presser foot, and behind the machine is your presser foot lifter. So just like a sewing machine, we'll raise that to put our fabric underneath or lower it to sew. We'll also make sure that we have it in raised position before we even begin threading this overlock machine. I'm going to close the looper cover. Over here we have our cloth plate. This gives us a flat surface for sewing, but if we ever want to convert the machine to a free arm, we can do so by removing the cloth plate. And I simply press this button underneath the cloth plate and pull this to the left. Sometimes it's a little snug, just pull it to the left while you press this button in toward the machine. And here you'll find your accessories. To put the cloth plate back on, just simply line it up around the free arm and snap it into place. In your accessory pouch, you have a pair of tweezers, a screwdriver, some extra needles, and this little piece right here called a converter or a spreader, and we'll talk more about that later. So let's try our 4-thread stitch.